I was at school then, took a year out, travelled around Africa. It was in the days before gap years. Came back, went to university. I was the first in my family to go to university. We were sort of a mining services family background. Worked my way through university, came out with a good degree, ran several businesses there, bought a flat and knocked it into 3 and rented it out and all that sort of stuff. Came out, got a job through the milk round with Shell, I think it was, International Brand Management or something. But shelved it for a year and had a go at something. And my father had been working for a business that sold lamps, and he'd really struggled to sell them because it was sort of ahead of its time. So I knocked together this lamp for industrial clothing manufacture, for sewing machines. And when I was in my final year, I went down to Singer Sewing Machines. I remember I was in Leicester and Coleman Road. And they bought 500. And I only had this thing that I'd knocked together in there. And so I had to work out how to make them then. I was lucky because the first advert that the first response to an advert that I placed in the Exchange of Mark paid for the entire operation. So I was in profit from literally almost day one. So I was lucky, but I've done other things where I've invested lots of money and not realised actually the customer doesn't want to buy it, and that's a classic mistake. An entrepreneur, I think, is someone who combines the ability to see things differently, sort of discovery, if you like. Partly that, although that's the smallest part of it, but then an enterprising approach, so a propensity to go the extra mile, do the desirable but unnecessary thing. And then, for some reason, a hunger just to keep going when it gets tough. You get all three of those in one, and you tend to end up with an entrepreneur. Well, I guess it's like anything. Somebody once said to me, everyone can play the piano, but there's only a few concert pianists in the world, and you can get to a level. So there's a talent associated with it, and there's a skill set associated with all that, with anything, I think. Being an entrepreneur is a creative exercise. It's you're creating value, you're adding value, you're creating something from nothing. You're taking labour and capital, you're mixing it together, and it's the wellspring of everything that we appreciate in life. I mean, all taxation comes from entrepreneurs. So it's it's partly innate, and it's partly skill set and nurture, and a lot of it's environment. As I say, a lot of entrepreneurs that I know have succeeded because they had a tough time at some point, whether it's a family member died or they didn't get on at school, or it was one of those things. I went to London Business School. I did an early growth program, and I had to pick. I was about after university, so I was about 23, 24, and I'd got going, and I was turning over 100,000 or something, and I pitched what I was going to do, and what I was going to do was go to America. And because I identified that as a great marketplace for the lamps for sewing, and I was going to build a business in America. And of course, they absolutely tore me to shreds. They said, "Well, you've got next to no business in the UK. How can you succeed in America?" Well, within 18 months, we were doing $2 million. So if I'd have listened to them, if I'd allowed my life to be governed by their interpretation rather than mine, I wouldn't have been successful. The word opportunity comes from the Latin ob portu, which is the phrase that they used to use before they had docks, and the boat would set out and wait to ride the wave into the shore to unload its cargo and pick up new cargo. So the word opportunity is all about riding the energy in waves. Julius Caesar, Shakespeare, there's a tide in the affairs of men which taken at the flood leads onto their fortunes. The whole nature of opportunity is wave-based. And so if you're out there looking to surf a wave to make, to get your opportunity there, the waves are, 60 feet high at the moment because we've got such huge economic storms. So the prospects for businesses who are prepared to not batten down the hatches, but to stay on deck. And I always say you either batten down the hatches, sail for a safe port, or you lash yourself to the deck and look how you can sail forward. And so those businesses that are doing that, I think, have faced great opportunities at the moment. So I think we'll look back in 25 years' time and we'll be glad that we were around at the moment when when it became really interesting for entrepreneurs again. Smaller state, less service, more tax. The government, I mean, there's going to be less of a lot of things. More hard work, perhaps. Well, the fundamental error is to start something that nobody wants to buy. So I've done that a couple of times, and I see people doing that all the time. So, and market research doesn't necessarily help you. It's the old story about the focus group said that nobody would ever buy a Sony Walkman and all that sort of stuff. So, being really sure that what you're doing is going to have a customer base, and the easiest way to do that is to get one. So first mistake, and the first advice I always give everyone is go and find a customer. Find a customer, look after them, find out how it works, find out what they need. Don't listen to what they say, but watch what they do. One of the great mantras is people are your best asset. And we're forever in business running around feeling guilty about not training our staff and all that sort of stuff enough. And it's an interesting dilemma because on the one hand, we all know that to win, you've got to have a great team, and they've got to know how to play. I mean, just look at the England result. There we had a great team in terms of their individual abilities, but it didn't play well as a team. So you've got to get the team gelling together, and you've got to have great players on the team. So we know that. I mean, anybody that doesn't think that is still operating in the dark ages, because your business is actually a function of your human capital and the way it integrates with one another, with itself. So that's relevant. However, the idea that my people are my best asset is based on a fallacy, because if you work for me and you're my asset, that's called slavery. Okay, and last time I looked, that sort of ran counter to the Human Rights Act. So you're not my asset, you're your own asset. And there's a really important distinction, because if you own an asset or you rent an asset, so if you work for me, I actually rent you, you own your own asset. Now that's a really important distinction, because if I own a house, I'll build a new kitchen. I won't build a new kitchen if I'm renting it. And why is that relevant? Well, firstly, it means you don't need to worry about feeling guilty as a business person, as an owner and a leader, about whether you're, training your staff in a Krami, if that's what they want to do. But and it also tells you that what you really want on your team is people who instinctively believe in investing in themselves. I mean, if you look at lots of companies that do well, they have a great laugh, because it unlocks that human capital I was talking about. It attracts people, and people want to be part of something that's fun. I hate business books, and the reason I hate them is because you're beavering away at the coalface, and you're tempted by a book because. For two reasons. I mean, if you're a leader, you tend to be driven by a couple of needs. One is to grow and develop and get better and build and all those sorts of things. And the other is to contribute and give a lot back. And so you're at the coalface and you've got that mindset. So every now and again you dip in, you go, oh, there's a book, I'll read that. But they always come from two angles, really. They either come from the here I am. Aren't I wonderful? This is how I did it. Sort of ego-driven, celebrity-esque type. Here's my post-rationalised theory of how you make money or how you run a business, which you read, and sometimes you think, well, that's quite an interesting point. But you don't. I've never bought the idea that somebody else's journey is going to match mine. And then the other book you get tends to be the more academically driven one, where they go out and they interview 5,000 businesses and they study them and they aggregate all the data, and they came back and say, oh look, this is what we found, this is what's going on. And I always thought, well, yeah, I'm not sure that's right either. So what I tried to do here is to write a book that talks to me as I like to be talked to. I'm a great believer in not pulling the ladder up behind you, but helping other people up, which is what how I got on. So to the extent that I'm able to try and share what I think I know with others, I'm up for it. So I do that on a one-to-one basis, and the book was just another way of doing it.